Thank you for joining us with Pinnacle Webinars Series Episode 43. It's love, intimacy, and long term relationships. Now, is love still part of your future? Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Greg Green, and today we're going to talk about a subject that can be exciting, uncomfortable, deeply personal, and sometimes even a little controversial. We're going to talk about love, companionship, romance, physical intimacy, and long term relationships later in life. And I want to begin with a question. Do you believe that there is an age when a person should stop loving or looking for love? Is there an age when becomes inappropriate? Is there an age where physical intimacy is no longer important? Is there an age when you're simply supposed to be content being alone? Or perhaps the better question is, who decides that love has an expiration date? Today, we're going to challenge some of the assumptions surrounding relationships later in life. We're going to talk about whether entering a long term romantic relationship after 50, 60, 70, or even 80 makes sense. We'll talk about companionship. We'll talk about physical intimacy. We'll talk about sexuality in a mature and respectful way. We'll talk about the risk of entering a relationship. We'll talk about something equally important, the right to choose not to be in one, because being single isn't a failure and being in a relationship isn't automatically a success. The real question is, what kind of life do you want to live? Now, the myth that romance belongs to young people. For much of our lives, society, it gives us a very predictable picture of romance. Meet someone, fall in love, get married, raise a family, grow older together. And then somewhere along the way, romance seems to disappear from conversation. But real life doesn't follow that script. People get divorced, people lose spouses, people remain single, people discover themselves later in life, people change. And sometimes people meet someone at 55 who can make them feel more alive than they have felt in decades, or at 65 or 72 or 80. There is no universal expiration date on companionship. And I think that's an important message for everyone entering a new chapter of life. Your past does not necessarily determine your future. You may have experienced a wonderful marriage. You may have experienced a difficult marriage. You may have been divorced. You may have lost someone you loved. You may have never married. Or you may simply choose to remain single. Whatever your history is, you still have the right to ask, what do I want now? Now, there's a difference between needing someone and wanting someone. The distinction is extremely important. There's a big question between I need someone to complete me and my life is complete and I'd like someone to share it with. Those are very different foundations for a relationship. When you're younger, you may enter a relationship because you want security. You want someone to help build a life with. You may want children. You may want financial stability. You may want social acceptance. But later in life, the priorities can change. You may be looking for companionship. I'm talking about conversation, affection, adventure, emotional connection, shared interest, travel, laughter, physical intimacy, or simply someone sitting across the table at breakfast who makes you smile. That's not dependency, that's companionship. And there's nothing wrong with wanting it. Why connection matters. One of the central themes of the Pinnacle philosophy is connection. Human beings are wired for connection. We want to be known, we want to be appreciated, we want someone to listen, and we want someone to celebrate our victories. And we want someone to sit beside us during difficult moments. A romantic relationship can provide a unique form of connection. But let's be clear, romantic connection is not the only form of connection. Friendships matter, family matters, community matters, purpose matters, volunteer work matters, social group that matter. That's why we created connections. We want people to have meaningful opportunities to engage with others regardless of whether they're married, partnered, divorced, widowed, or single. A healthy life requires connection, but connection doesn't necessarily require romance. Is there a right age to enter a long term relationship? Now, let's answer one of the biggest questions. When is the best age to enter a long term relationship? Well, there isn't one. There is no magic number. 55 isn't too old. 65 isn't too old. 75 isn't too old. 80 isn't automatically too old. And 30 isn't automatically the right age either. The right time is less about the chronological age and more about your readiness. Are you emotionally available? Have you processed your previous relationship? Do you know what you want? Are you comfortable being alone? Are you willing to compromise? Are you capable of communicating honestly? Can you respect another person's independence? Can you discuss difficult subjects? Can you maintain boundaries? Can you accept that a healthy relationship requires two complete individuals rather than two people trying to rescue one another? Those questions are far more important than your age. Why relationships later in life can be different? Well, there can actually be tremendous advantages to dating later in life. You may know yourself better. You may know what you want and don't want. You may have developed better communication skills. You may have learned from previous relationships. You may be, you know, better. You may be less interested in impressing people. You may care more about authenticity. You may have more freedom. You may have more time. And you may finally understand that a good relationship isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about finding someone whose values, personality, lifestyle, expectations, and goals are compatible with yours. That can be enormously freeing. Now, what about physical intimacy? Now, let's talk about something that often gets ignored: physical intimacy. There's a tendency in our culture to assume that physical intimacy belongs primarily to young people. That simply is not a fair assumption. Adults can continue to experience affection, attraction, sensuality, and sexual intimacy throughout later life. The nature of intimacy may change. Bodies change, hormones change, health circumstances can change. Medication can affect sexual function. Menopause and aging can affect sexuality. Emotional circumstances can affect desire. None of those things changes means that affection or intimacy automatically becomes irrelevant. For some people, physical intimacy remains an important part of a romantic relationship. For others, companionship, companionship and emotional closeness are more important. And for some people, physical intimacy isn't something they want at all. For all of those choices can be legitimate. The important thing is that partners communicate openly, respect boundaries, and make their decisions together. Intimacy is more than sex. There's another point I want to emphasize. Intimacy is a much broader definition than sexual activity. Intimacy can be holding hands, hugging, sitting close together, kissing, talking late into the night, sharing dreams, feeling safe enough to be vulnerable, laughing together, traveling together, waking up beside someone, having someone who knows your history, and knowing that someone genuinely cares about your future. Physical affection and emotional intimacy can be deeply meaningful at every stage of adulthood. The questions of remarriage. Let's talk a little bit about that. Another important question is whether people should remarry later in life. Again, there's no universal answer. Marriage can be wonderful, but marriage has legal, financial, estate planning, and family implications. If you're considering marriage later in life, you should discuss this and everything more than just romance. You should discuss finances, living arrangements, debt, retirement income, estate plans, beneficiary designations, family expectations, adult children, long term care, healthcare decisions, housing, inheritance, and what happens if one partner eventually needs significant care. Romance is important, but so is reality. And mature love should be strong enough to have mature conversations. Now, the adult children conversation. Sometimes the biggest obstacle isn't the couple, it's the family. Adult children may have strong opinions about a parent's new relationship. They may worry about money, they may worry about inheritance, they may worry that someone is taking advantage of their parents. They may simply have difficulty seeing their parents as a romantic person. But here's something important: Your children don't necessarily get to decide whether you are allowed to love again. At the same time, if you're entering a new relationship later in life, you should recognize that your children may have legitimate concerns. The solution isn't secrecy, it's communication. And when substantial assets or legal interests are involved, it's wise to obtain independent professional advice. Love and financial planning should not be enemies, they should work together. When should you not enter a relationship? Now let's turn to the question: when might it be better not to enter a long term romantic relationship? If you're trying to escape loneliness at any cost, if you're still emotionally consumed by a previous relationship, if you're hoping someone will rescue you financially, if you're ignoring obvious red flags, if you're being pressured, if the other person doesn't respect your boundaries, if you're being isolated from friends or family, if there is manipulation or abuse, if you feel you have to surrender your identity to keep the relationship, those are warning signs. And here's one of the most important principles. Never trade your independence for companionship. A healthy relationship should enhance your life, not eliminate your identity. When is being single the healthier choice? This deserves to be said clearly. There's absolutely nothing wrong with choosing to remain single. You don't have to be in a relationship to have a meaningful life. Some people genuinely thrive in dependency. They love their freedom, they enjoy their own space, they travel alone, they build deep friendships, they volunteer, they pursue hobbies, they spend time with family, they create businesses. They simply don't want a romantic partner, and they contribute to their communities. And that's all okay. But single is not the same thing as being lonely. And being in a relationship is not the same thing as being connected. A person can marry and profoundly be lonely. A person can be single and be deeply connected. So don't pursue a relationship because society tells you that you should. Pursue one because it genuinely contributes to the life you want. So there are 5 questions before entering a serious relationship. If you're considering a long-term relationship, I want you to ask yourself 5 questions. Question one: am I genuinely ready, or am I simply lonely? Loneliness can make us overlook things we normally wouldn't accept. Question two: do I like this person, or do I simply like how the person makes me feel? Those aren't always the same thing. Question three: can I maintain my independence while being in this relationship? Can I keep my friends? Can I keep my interests, maintain my identity? Question four: can we talk about uncomfortable subjects? Can we talk about money, health, sex, family, religion, politics, living arrangements, retirement, caregiving, death, estate planning? If you can't talk about these difficult subjects, the relationship may not be ready for a long term commitment. And of course, question five: does this relationship make my life better? Not perfect, not problem free, but better. Do I laugh more, feel supported, feel respected, feel safe, feel encouraged, feel like myself? Those are important indicators. So, don't rush because you're getting older. There can be a strange psychological pressure later in life. You may think, I don't have much time left, and that can cause people to rush. But age isn't a reason to ignore warning signs. In fact, the older we become, the more important thoughtful decision making may be. You don't need to rush into a marriage because you're 60. You don't need to rush into cohabitation because you're 70. You don't need to combine finances because you're 75. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You can take your time. A mature relationship doesn't have to move at the speed of a young person's relationship. You have the right to learn about one another, to travel together, to spend time together, to maintain separate homes if that works, to develop trust gradually, and to make decisions thoughtfully. Now, let's talk a little bit about love without losing yourself. One of the most beautiful things about a mature relationship is that you don't have to disappear into it. You can be two individuals choosing to share life. You can have your own friends, your own interests, your own financial resources, your own routines, and still have an extraordinary relationship. In fact, maintaining healthy individuality can strengthen a relationship. You don't need someone to complete you. You need someone who can complement you, someone who respects your story, someone who understands that you have a past, someone who appreciates where you've been, and someone who is excited about where you're going. The Pinnacle perspective. At Pinnacle Transformation Group, we believe that your next chapter should be intentional. That includes relationships. We encourage people to ask, what kind of relationship do I want? Who do I want to become? What kind of people do I want to be around? What does love look like in this stage of my life? And perhaps more importantly, what does a fulfilling life look like with or without having a romantic partner? Because the objective isn't to convince everyone to find a partner. The objective is to help you create a life that is connected, purposeful, healthy, and meaningful. For some people, that includes marriage. For some people, a committed long term relationship. For others, companionship without marriage. For others, a deeply fulfilling single life. There is no single formula. So, is it ever a taboo? Let's answer the question directly. Is it ever taboo to enter a romantic relationship later in life? In my view, age alone should not make healthy adults love taboo. What matters is consent, mutual respect, emotional maturity, honesty, safety, and compatibility. Two consenting adults have the right to decide what kind of relationship is appropriate for them. What should be considered unacceptable is not someone's age, it's exploitation, manipulation, coercion, abuse, deception, or taking advantage of someone who's vulnerable. That's where we should draw the line. Not at 50, not at 60, not at 70, not at 80. There's no expiration date on the human need for love and connection. Now, let's talk about your next chapter. Imagine that you're 65, you wake up tomorrow morning, you have perhaps 20, 25, 30 years more ahead of you. Would you really want to spend those years believing that your opportunity for love has passed simply because society says you're too old? What if someone wonderful comes into your life? What if someone you meet makes you laugh? Someone who challenges you intellectually, someone who enjoys traveling, someone who shares your values, someone who holds your hand, someone who listens, someone who makes ordinary Tuesday feel completely special. Why should age automatically disqualify that possibility? And at the same time, if you're perfectly happy being single, why should society pressure you into a relationship? That's the freedom of this next chapter that you're trying to develop. You get to decide. Don't let age write the ending. Let me leave you with this. Your life has chapters. Some chapters were written by circumstances. Some were written by choices. Some were painful. Some were beautiful. Some you would never repeat, and some you may wish you never could relive. But here's the wonderful thing about a new chapter, it hasn't been written yet. Maybe your next chapter includes a relationship. Maybe it includes falling in love. Maybe it includes marriage. Maybe it includes companionship. Maybe it includes friendship and community. Or maybe it includes a wonderfully independent person and a wonderfully independent life. There is no wrong answer. The goal is not to follow someone else's definition of happiness. The goal to discover your definition of happiness. So don't ask, am I too old for love? Ask, am I open to love? Don't ask, should I be in a relationship because everyone else is? You should ask, would a relation genuinely improve the life that I'm creating? And don't ask, what's wrong with me because I'm single? Ask, what kind of life would make me genuinely fulfilled? Because your worth isn't determined by whether you have a partner. Your age doesn't determine whether you deserve affection. Your past doesn't have to dictate your future. At Pinnacle Transformation Group, we believe that your next chapter should be intentional. And that means giving yourself permission to explore all the possibilities. I'm talking about love, connection, adventure, purpose, growth, intimacy, friendship, and yes, even starting over. Because perhaps the greatest misconception about getting old is that your life becomes smaller. It doesn't have to. It can become deeper. It can become authentic, more intentional, more meaningful, and perhaps in some unexpected way, more beautiful. So, whether you're happily married, recently divorced, widowed, dating, in a committed relationship, or completely content being single, remember this: your next chapter belongs to you, and you get to decide who and what you invite into it. Thank you for joining me. And I hope that you'll continue the conversation with us through Connections, where we explore relationships, purpose, healthy aging, personal growth, and what it really means to design your next chapter. Because sometimes the most important relationship you'll ever build is the relationship you have with the life you're creating. Your next chapter is waiting, guys. What will you do with it? Thank you.